What is up everybody and welcome back to the channel. We are officially one full week into ZG Phase 1 release on Conquest of Azeroth, and it has been an absolute roller coaster with 21 completely custom classes and 69 unique specs thrown into the jungle. Trying to predict this meta was like trying to herd cats, but the dust has finally settled. We have a massive amount of active database logs from both Ascended and Mythic difficulties, and a crystal clear picture of the tier list has emerged. But before we look at the chart, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. The developers just dropped a nuke on the public test realms, aimed squarely at the undisputed king of week 1. If you looked at the single damage meters this week, you already know who I'm talking about, the Crusader Templar. Their maximum output potential in Ascendant difficulty was so high that it completely broke the scaling curve. The developers have officially stepped in with massive rework that is currently live on the PTR. Looking directly at the developer log, the goal here is twofold. Rein in the god tier maximum ceiling but significantly raise the baseline power so the spec is more accessible. What does that mean for the meta? It might lose its spot as the ultimate ceiling breaker, but the overall medium damage is going to be exceptionally reliable. Now, before we place these classes into tiers, let's talk about how we're defining success today. We are looking at 4 distinct metrics across the logs. First, we have Ascended difficulty split between pure boss damage and overall boss encounter, which means factoring in extra mobs that spawn during the boss fight. Second, we have the Mythic difficulty logs, again split between pure boss only damage and boss plus adds. This is a crucial distinction. We are not talking about dungeon trash packs here. We are looking directly at who pumps raw single target onto boss and who pads the meters by blowing up the extra adds during the encounter. While ranking these classes, we are looking heavily at the medium performance, the thick middle line of these box plots. A class that consistently hits 15k DPS every single pull is vastly superior to a class that hits 25k DPS once but struggles to break 8k the rest of the time. Consistency is king in progression rating. Now let's finally get into the S tier, the Crusader Templar. Even knowing that the PTR nerfs are incoming, we cannot ignore what the Crusader did this week. Pulling up the Ascendant boss logs, it is genuinely comical. The Crusader not only holds the highest medium DPS on Ascendant boss fights, but looking at the upper percentile outliner on the far right, it is completely off the charts. Even when you factor in ad faces and cleave padding on Ascendants, it maintains its dominance. Archery Ranger. While the Crusader broke Ascendants, the Archery Ranger quietly conquered Mythic. Looking at the Mythic boss and trash charts, the Archery Ranger is the undisputed MVP for Mythic encounters the spawn adds. For those of us who love that classic marksmanship playstyle, this is exactly what we want to see. When looking at the overall encounter where you can cleave down extra mobs, it dominates that medium DPS. It provides incredible consistency without relying purely on high roll RNG. Infinity Chronomancer. Rounding out the S tier is the ultimate jack of all trades. Whenever we are checking pure boss damage on Ascendants or overall encounters throughout Mythic, this archetype simply refuses to drop out of the top 5. It brings stellar utility, fantastic sustained damage, and 0 major weaknesses regardless of whatever boss is strictly single target or summons a small army. Death Necromancer. If you are progressing through Mythic and hitting a wall on pure single target boss fights, the Death Necromancer is an absolute powerhouse. Pulling up the Mythic boss data, it takes the undisputed top spot for median single target DPS in that difficulty, scaling exceptionally well as boss fights drag out. Sentinel Starcaller. Right on the heels of the Death Necromancer is the Sentinel Starcaller. This spec is a phenomenal performer in Mythic single target encounters, tailing just slightly behind the top spot while simultaneously maintaining an extreme strong competitive edge on Ascended boss fights. Stalking Venomancer. Shifting over to Ascendant difficulty, the Stalking Venomancer provides itself a premium single target specialist. On Ascendant boss charts, it holds an incredibly high medium floor right behind the Crusader Templar. offering a tight performance spread that guarantees heavy damage on single pull. Houndmaster Witch Hunter. Sharing that single target spot on Ascendant is Houndmaster Witch Hunter. This spec delivers remarkably consistent single target output on boss encounters without relying on wild RNG spikes, making it one of the most dependable range physical profiles in the game right now. Hellfire Knights of Zorox. Rounding out the A tier, we have the ultimate ad cleave monster, the Hellfire Knight of Zoroth. While its pure single target boss damage sits in the middle of the pack, the second and extra mob spots during the boss encounter is DPS skyrockets up the chart, letting you pad the meters and meld the ads faster than almost anything else on the board. Demolition Tinker. Kicking off the B tier, we have the Demolition Tinker. This spec brings fantastic utility and absolutely pumps when it comes to area of effect presence. Looking at the data, the Demolition Tinker performs exceptionally well in boss plus ads scenarios across both Ascended and Mythic difficulties, making it a stellar pick for encounters that demand heavy ad control. Brutality Barbarian. The Brutality Barbarian secures its spot in the B tier. Brutality brings extremely consistent melee cleave to the table. It pads the numbers heavily during boss ad phases while offering steady, reliable scaling throughout the encounter. Corruption Cultist. Moving to the casters, the Corruption Cultist sits comfortably on the upper middle of the pack. It is highly consistent profile that holds its own smoothly during chaotic ad phases, while keeping a steady, reliable medium damage output on pure Ascendant's single target fight. Engravement Runemaster. Rounding out the B tier is the Engravement Runemaster. This spec doesn't rely on crazy burst windows or massive RNG to get its numbers. It's a steady performer with incredibly reliable single target scaling in both Mythic and Ascended difficulties. Valkyria Sun Cleric. Dropping into C tier, we have the Valkyria Sun Cleric. While this spec has some solid burst potential, the data shows a massive amount of variance. It struggles to maintain the sustained consistency seen in the higher tiers, relying far too heavily on specific encounter mechanics to crack into the top percentiles. Artificer Chronomancer. Artificer Chronomancer finds itself in a similar boat. The output potential is absolutely there, but its medium performance is strictly average. It requires perfect cooldown alignment and an ideal combat scenario to really pop off, making it far less reliable for progression than the Infinity Chronomancer. Incineration Pyromancer. Next in the C tier is the Incineration Pyromancer. It brings great burst windows, but it struggles to keep up with sustained cleave damage or the pure single target consistency that defines the S and A tier. Rot Venomancer. We have the Rot Venomancer. This spec does move up the rankings significantly the second extra mobs are introduced to the fight. However, when you isolate its performance to pure boss damage, it leaves a lot to be desired, keeping it strictly anchored in the middle of the pack. And that wraps up Week 1 meta breakdown for ZG Ascended and Mythic difficulty. The Conquest of Azeroth team is patching things incredibly fast, so the tier list will definitely evolve as the Crusader changes go live and players get their hands on more Phase 1 best in slot. Oh, and for people who say my tier is not interesting because I don't go under C, here you go. All other DPS specs in the D tier. Let me know in the comments, do you think the Crusader PTR changes are going to balance the class, or did the devs just completely gut it? Drop a like if the data helped you out, subscribe for more deep dive meta analysis, and until next time, Windowtism out.